Good evening, friends. This is Altazar, and I welcome you to the spontaneous Facebook Live broadcast on the topic of astrology revealing the United States identity crisis and this current period of time, or horoscope. So this is quite a time in the world, and we are obviously experiencing great tumult through the political, economic, and environmental crises that seem to be pervading all areas of life. And so tonight I'd like to reflect on what the astrology indicates about this time, and also draw some parallels to planetary positions that existed in the past that are similar to or the same as what we are going through right now by using the chart of the United States, which you see here. So for those of you who aren't familiar with me, or those of you who are, I'm Altazar of www.altazarastrology.com. You can also see many of my other videos on a variety of topics at my YouTube channel, Altazar Astrology. You go to YouTube and just do a search for Altazar Space Astrology, you'll find about 10 videos I have on various topics. So let's step back here and note that the chart of the United States is based on what many astrologers agree is and what we use for countries or corporations or businesses, the birth date of the United States, July 4th, 1776, 5:10 p.m., Philadelphia, PA. So for those of you not familiar with what a horoscope is, I'll just briefly indicate how we as astrologers discern potential events, or for individuals when things may occur. And astrology is not meant to be a fate type thing or an absolute possibility of what may occur for someone or a country, but it does indicate potentials for opportunities as well as challenges. And to ride the wave of the cycles of the universe, people who are in the know utilize astrology as a way to take advantage of those cycles when they occur, or prepare for the challenges that may occur in those cycles. And that's not to instigate a sense of fear and avoidance of reality, but basically when there are challenges, and that's the cyclical way life goes, things are dismantled or changed or evolved, and we are definitely in one of those periods of time of transformation is a better word to use. So as I've pointed out, the chart of the United States as a chart indicates where all the planets were, that is Mercury through Pluto, the moment of the birth of the United States, just like any individual person's natal chart. We're not going to get into the technicalities of that now. Many of you are at least familiar with an astrology chart. But at any rate, a horoscope is based on looking at where the planets are at any point in time as they continue to move in various signs. In the United States is a sun sign, as most people know their sun sign, Cancer, at 13 degrees Cancer. There are 30 degrees per sign, so there are 30 different types of Cancers. And so whenever a planet moves into a position that is corresponding with the sun sign of 13 degrees, or the Venus at 3 degrees Cancer, or the United States has Mars at 21 degrees Gemini, etc., that portends an opportunity, challenge, or possibility of some kind of transformation or transition. And that's how a real horoscope is done. So when we look at the 10 planetary bodies and a couple of other symbols in a chart, a real horoscope is based on looking at where all the planets are, Mercury through Pluto, at any point in time, and how they are interrelating with the planets of the chart of the individual or country that we are evaluating. So with that said, I'm going to get into just talking about where the planets are now and what that means in the chart of a country like the United States. So currently, and I'm going to focus on, a planet that really is the most poignant in terms of challenges and the externalities of economic and political and cultural consciousness in a country. So what we have here is the planet Saturn has been moving through the sign of Sagittarius. As you see, the United States is a Sagittarius rising. And so this first section, or what we call a house, there are 12 houses in a chart. The first section is in everyone's chart, how you express your identity, how you have a sensibility about your identity, how others may experience you, at least more superficially in terms of your personality and even your physical appearance. So the United States, as a Sagittarian rising, has a character of being idealistic, philosophical, even culturally integrated with religion or religious freedom. And freedom is the key and watchword of Sagittarius. Expansive, open, and open to the multiple cultural integration and influences of different people and through immigration even. And so the fact that Saturn is now moved through over this past year, the first house of the chart, implies that the United States is going through an identity crisis. Or, whenever an individual has Saturn going through their first house, it's a time when a person has to go through a period of deep and serious introspection about who they are and how they want to express themselves to the world. So this is not only a theme that's been relative to the past year and coincidental with our election last November, but also the fact that our current president, Donald Trump, is a Gemini, and you see the opposite of Sagittarius is Gemini, and it just so happens that his sun sign is right around the planet Mars in the chart of the United States. And Gemini is in the area of the house, seventh house, associated with a relationship, a profound relationship with the country. The question is, what kind of relationship? And unfortunately, if someone who has their sun sign here has an adverse angle to the planet Neptune, which can imply deception or misdirection, or someone who utilizes tantalizing media dynamics that play on people's emotions, fears, or other more superficial dynamics for expedient political direction. So Donald Trump is a real challenge for the identity of the United States, because not only his sun sign is in Sagittarius near this Mars factor in terms of assertive identity, but his moon is opposite his sun sign in Sagittarius. And so that implies him having a heavy burden associated with evolving or devolving the identity of the United States. And The higher side of Sagittarius is freedom, openness, multicultural experience, and a sense of acceptance of all different points of view, an egalitarian point of view. The downside of Sagittarius is a certain jingoistic, self-absorbed, self-righteous, elitist, or prejudicial form of sense of superiority. And so, unfortunately, we see that Donald Trump has embraced the parochial, limited way to pander to the nationalistic sentiments of certain racial groups and or political groups, conservative and ultra-conservative in the United States, and has played on that emotion and fear. Now, so Saturn here is in one context activating that problem of the identity crisis for the United States and its relationship to the rest of the world. Now, is it any wonder or any coincidence that, well, let me just preface this. Saturn also is opposite the planet Mars. And when Saturn is opposite Mars, that portends a time of serious drum beating in terms of potential for military action and war. And we have seen historically when Saturn has been in an angle to Mars that the United States has encountered or been involved with potential military action, such as when Saturn was in this area of Gemini back in the early 90s, was when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and we went into the first Iraq War. Now, I'll also point out that in 1958, when Saturn was in this similar position, was when the Soviet Union started to advance technologically in the space race, and that energized the Cold War and also energized nuclear development for intercontinental ballistic missiles. So it's not a peaceful or easy energy when Saturn is in relationship to this Mars position. And in fact, the reason I would say astrologically we're seeing at this time the threat of Kim Jong-un from North Korea and his rapidly escalating nuclear efforts threatening the United States is again a symptom of the Saturn position. Now, there's also, we've talked about this political cultural dynamic of nationalism and even racism associated with the alt-right and the neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Well, it just so happens when Saturn was in this position in the late 1920s, early 1930s, that was associated with the rise of Adolf Hitler to attain power and chancellery in Germany, and the rise of the original Nazism in Germany. Also, we're going to look now at not only this political, cultural influence at this time, but also the fact that in the United States we see, well, maybe there's enough resistance to neo-Nazi and white supremacists as we're seeing around the country, which is a great deterrent to what potentially did occur back in the late 20s, early 30s. But on the other hand, we do see the reactionary movement towards anti-immigration and repression of especially Latinos and racial profiling. Typical example, with Saturn being right almost exactly in this position in the past month, has been Donald Trump's pardoning of Sheriff Arpaio of Arizona, who has been described as a racist and doing racial profiling, and was convicted of that and barred from his office as sheriff of the Phoenix or in the Arizona area. So all these symptoms are occurring now. The question always is whether or not we are responding to these in the uplifted, positive, humanitarian, and spiritually evolved way with courage. So next we'll look at the economic circumstances. And so I hate to be, wet blanket and foreboding in terms of just these times that we're in, but we all experience what has been going on in the areas that I've talked about. It just so happens that in 1929, when Saturn was exactly in this position opposite Mars and moving to the position of opposite Venus and Jupiter, which Saturn will be doing. Saturn will move into Capricorn towards December and into 2018, be in the exact same position as it was during the crash of the stock market and the collapse of our economy and the beginning of the Great Depression. Now, we have come a long way from the unregulated, wild, speculative, inflated investments that were going on in the 1920s. So that doesn't necessarily portend, the severity of the Depression occurring into 2018. But it does imply, given the volatility of other factors going on right now, including the increasing calamitous environmental dynamics, such as these horrific hurricanes that we've just experienced in Texas and Florida, and the unpredictability of climate change in terms of tornadoes, hurricanes, droughts, fires, and especially the extent of the fires in the West, that all of these things can lend towards certain difficulties with our economy, not to mention then the threats of terrorism and Kim Jong-un. Well, God forbid he actually develops something that could be of a real threat. So it's just a warning for many of you that this is a good time now to prepare to have certain assets and survival dynamics established, such as some spare water and food supplies, and I would say also getting some hard currency stowed away, as well as wouldn't hurt if you have the financial means to increase your investments in gold or silver at this time. So this not only was an economic position or symbolic position representing the Great Depression, 1929 through 33, of Saturn's position currently, but also I will point out that in 2008, when we had the beginning of the Great Recession, that was when Saturn was in another adverse position. Saturn was in Virgo, and you'll see that forms a square to the same Mars here, and that's what brought in the Great Recession. So historically, this is somewhat semi-scientific, if you will, as well as metaphysical. This position of Saturn does imply preparedness. Let's put it that way. Not panic and fear, but spiritual centeredness and responsible, prudent preparedness. I will point out as well, when Saturn was in Gemini on the Mars position here. So here, all I've been talking about all this evening is the fact that Saturn has been here now in aspect to Mars. Saturn during the Great Depression's beginning was here in relationship to Mars and Venus and Jupiter. Saturn was here when we had the Great Recession in relationship to Mars. And Saturn was here soon after 9/11 in 2001 and into 2002 and 3 at the time of the beginning of the Iraq War, at which time, we had a minor recession, and also the price of gold began to shoot up. So let's put it this way. It's a good time to invest in gold or silver, as usually December through January is typically a time when the price of gold does go up, just based on demand from the Asian countries. So also, I will point out that the planet Uranus right now, being in Aries, is in an angle here to the planet Mars as well. So it does represent somewhat of a revolutionary time in the United States that could portend a favorable progressive development in regards to what people start to acknowledge as important cooperation that needs to occur in Congress between the political parties, and especially in regards to climate change and policies that really address, working with favorably protective measures to prevent worst calamitous dynamics associated with the environment. So very uncertain and interesting times we're in. I wish you all well. If you are interested in a horoscope to look at your individual chart and what it portends during this coming 6 months and 1 year, I welcome contact from you. I can be reached through my website, www.altazarastrology.com, or you can email me, altazarastrology, all one word, at gmail.com. And visit my YouTube channel. When you do a search, when you go to YouTube, search Altazar space astrology. So blessings and best of wishes to you all during these times.